You're listening to the Bon Ray Show. It's 8 in the evening. Tune in every night at 8 to listen to the Bon Ray Show on Irish News Radio or ITV.ie. And you can contact anything that you've heard or if anything you'd like to discuss at news@irishnews.net. Good evening, you're listening to the Bon Ray Show. Today is Monday, so we'll be talking about the financial mess and the homelessness and the EU and all that is creating the financial disaster in Ireland. Ireland is the third most in debt country in the developed world. 201 billion and mounting. Goes back to our mess with the Lisbon when we voted out. The Lisbon Treaty Protocol was agreed for Ireland 2009. It was to introduce and enforce a Lisbon Treaty after it was rejected in 2008. To impose a law, an EU law, that couldn't if it contradicted with the Irish Constitution. Enforcing the EU law was against the Irish Constitution. So that's why they had to break it down. And this is why you will see a lot of things to do with blasphemy, different things to try and break down the Constitution. It's not that they're really worried about blasphemy because they brought in hate speech to protect Islam and different things. And you've always been able to talk about Christians, think about Father Ted or any of the other comedy acts that were made famous. Blasphemy hasn't been used in this country for over 200 years. There's a other reason that they want the blasphemy brought in. It's to break down more of our Constitution, because at the time our Constitution was written, that our country was second to God. Once you take that away, then it is enforced by the state, which our state is under the EU. So then whatever thing we do is to do with the EU and not to do with God. We had some sort of protection, and that is the reason why. When you think about anything, Father Ted or the amount of comedians or whatever that said anything about Christianity, there's nobody ever been charged. There is another reason why the government is bringing this in, and you can guarantee it's not for our protection. They're all EU puppets. It's a very dangerous organisation, this EU. The other thing is to get rid of free speech. They brought in part of our Constitution that we would have free speech. So they need to get rid of that. Now they've covered their backs anyway by bringing in hate speech. They just twist all the words around. But free speech, we will not be allowed to speak in a while about the EU, about our government, we're not allowed to talk about Islam as it is. And you can get 2 years up to talking that, but eventually they will bring that up to the EU, to our government, to anything that they don't want us to talk about. The left have already enforced it. There was like riots in England trying to bring up that well, they weren't riots, but there was the Brexit. They want another Brexit vote.
You are listening to Irish News Radio and irishnews.net. Email news@irishnews.net.
Good evening. It's Monday, so we'll be talking about the financial mess and the EU and everything that affects this country. Ireland is the third most in debt country in the developed world, 201 billion and mounting. The Lisbon Treaty Protocol was agreed for Ireland 2009 to introduce in force a Lisbon Treaty after it was rejected in 2008. The protocol meant that the EU wanted to impose a law that couldn't if it contradicted with the Irish Constitution. Enforcing EU law against the Irish Constitution, things that would be affected would be like free speech. As we see that's coming in now, they've rechanged it to call that hate speech. The EU is a very dangerous organisation. We need to get out of the EU, that I've been saying so many, but before we even step that, we need a good government for the Irish people who will protect Irish values. We need independent audits from the EU. Mostly, we need to be given back our freedom. We are very much under dictatorship, and it's very dangerous. They're talking about, Michael D. Higgins will get back in again. Remember, opinion polls are for influencing people. It's a device for influencing people, not a device for measuring it. Think about the abortion. They didn't really know. They were like trying to influence people to vote for the abortion. Now, I'm pretty sure that the abortion vote was rigged, like many of our other ones, like our second Lisbon Treaty was illegal, and it was rigged, and there has been footage been proven of that one being rigged. But I'm pretty sure that the abortion was rigged too, but the opinion polls coming up to it was all very much to influence people to vote for abortion. We have lost our media, we have lost everything. There is no free speech. We are under very much dictatorship, and it's a very dangerous time. We will eventually not be able to speak about the EU or our government or anything else. We are very much under a dictatorship, and until we break down this government, both Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, we're in very, very deep waters with this. And all of the elites in this country, like Bono and stuff, going on saying Africa and Europe take over the world. What does that even mean? It's such an insane thing. Like, I don't know what. Like, he lives in such a protected, lovely house, massive walls. He will never have to have or deal with refugees. When Bono wants to tell people how they should and shouldn't live, tell him to give away all his money. I'll listen to him when he gives away all his money and he lives in a council house like a normal person, and he deals with everything else. If he won't even live with a normal council house around Ireland, or he gives up his money and moves in with the refugees that he loves so much, give all his property away, and then I will have respect for him. But while he lives in a massive house behind massive walls, and his kids are all protected and his family is all protected, yet he lectures to everybody else how they should put their lives in danger. While he obviously won't, any more than the Pope as well, living in his Vatican, big walled under safety, where they lecture to other people how they should give away their safety. But obviously they're not going to be doing that. So remember, when they started polls, it's a measuring tool. Again, Leo, apparently we all love Leo. I don't know why. Either the Irish are. I don't know whether the votes are all completely rigged or people are just brain dead. Leo is a complete EU rent boy from the very beginning. He was pimped and trained from a young age. He went into the EU. He was pimped and trained for that job. Higgins is a dangerous character as well. He's good friends with Soros, which is a disaster on the whole of the European continent. He's been a disaster through Africa. He's a disaster everywhere. He's a very, very dangerous man. An extreme leftist, which our government is and our media is. There's 3,600 council homes lying empty. We've 10,000 homeless people, 4,000 are children. A 3-bedroom house by this woman was short distance for her mother, where she's taken her own life, where there's been houses around, empty houses by the council, where this woman had committed suicide. Owned by 360 council homes are owned by local authorities that are putting in non-Irish migrants as they come through. The EU project will come to an end once the British leave. Now, the fact is, I do believe they will leave, but what will happen before that step is yet to see. The question is, how many more dirty tricks will be played out to keep them in? They've already seen this Brexit thing that they voted on. Of course, the Irish media went rampage on it, saying, oh yeah, the democracy, they want another vote, they want another vote. Forgetting everything that May and Cameron had promised the British. Cameron, when he went in to Brexit, said they will never be asked. And they felt very proud of that because they watched how the Irish were made vote again. Cameron said the British people will never be asked to vote. They will never be influenced by any. This is their voice. And the one thing that Juncker said, that, you know, if he'd been allowed, if Cameron had allowed him get involved in it, they would have never voted out, which just shows you how undemocratic the EU is. If you had allowed me interfere in your voting system, you wouldn't have been able to vote out. Like, that's crazy. But Cameron, the only thing I do respect him for, even though he voted to remain, he said this is for the people, this is their vote, it's not to do with anybody else. There's one person, one vote, and they all get to say. And this has all been trying to be backstabbed and stopped in any manner or shape against the British people. And then the Irish being the huge cheerleader behind the EU, going, yeah, you go get those British. This was their vote. Over 1 million in the difference voted to leave. They did know what they wanted. And same as the Irish, we did know. We shouldn't have been asked again. People who voted no to Lisbon should have been respected. But we don't live. We live under an EU dictatorship in this country. And at that time they were broken. They were intimidated and bullied, and they agreed to the terms because they did it in fear. They were fear of another famine and fear of this. But the British aren't like the Irish. And I do think that the British will stand still because there's too many. May came into power and she said Brexit means Brexit, even though she was a Remainer herself. They don't tend to. The good thing about the British is they tend to dot their I's and cross their T's. They don't tend to be like the Irish. They're very much straightforward, and they believe in democracy. They believe if the people voted for this, then the people should be given it, not being undermined and told that they're not clever enough, or, you know, that they're racist bigots or they're fascist and all these sort of other insults to try and get them to change their minds. They voted. They knew what they were voting. Cameron said, and they spelled it out loads, and God knows it was a huge campaign to get them to vote to stay in the EU. But in fairness to Cameron, he did say to them, this is your only vote, this is to do with you, your people, this is your vote. And this is a big change, whether you decide to stay or go, this is yours. But there will be one vote for one person. And that is all being trying to stop now, which is quite shocking. But the Irish being delighted because they think, you know, the English get forced to stay in, then our trade will be, which they're right in a way. But instead of actually dealing with the British, is what they should be doing, the Irish. They should be saying we should actually be dealing directly with the British, not calling even the Irish border an EU border and hiding behind the EU. You go beat them, EU. Like, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, cowardly behaviour from the rent boy of the EU. But no shock there. The whole government is complete EU puppets, and they're all paid out. And why wouldn't they? They're getting paid loads of money. Well, the rest of us suffer. Like, our homelessness is a disaster. Everything about this country is a disaster. But they're staying in. And when the British, because I do believe the British will leave. I do believe they've gone through 2 wars. So I don't think they're easy people to back down or intimidate or bully. they're quite a strong character people, so I do believe they will be leaving on the 29th of March. To be using Ireland as in the border and all that, and for our government to allow this is actually shocking and disgrace on them. And most of those were all paid out. That voices that in for another Brexit vote was all paid by Soros, the same person who backed our abortion, the same person who does loads of stuff. But I don't think the British will back down into that. They will leave. Now they're talking about there's more than likely that the British will leave without a deal. I think it'll be a no deal situation. The reason being is that they're trying to force her into doing a customs border down the Irish Sea. So the British aren't going to do that, and they're not going to go out non-fighting. If you try and force them in, they're not going to stay in. They're definitely, they are fighting. They've been through 2 world wars. They took on those 2 world wars with no second thoughts. They took them on. They will save their country. They will. They will stick to their guns, and they will give the people what Cameron said that they deserve, that this is their voice, and nobody can change that. And I think that they will stick through that. But while we should be really on the British side, saying, yeah, you voted for this, we should be going to trade with you. Instead, we are on the German side, very much like De Valera in the Second World War when he gave condolence to Hitler. Very much like that. This very much feels like we're very much on the German side again, which is pretty shocking. And it does feel German and French. Well, it's kind of like an EU company. And they try to dissolve it by calling Europe. It's not Europe. It's the EU. And people have to stop thinking of the EU as Europe. Europe is a continent. Some of European countries aren't actually in it, which are doing absolutely fine. You have Iceland. You have Switzerland. They are absolutely flying. Both of them are very different. One's quite small population, the other one's a larger population, but they're absolutely fine. Anybody else? Norway, they stayed with the EEC, they're doing fine. Won't fall apart, but because the Irish were we were bullied and threatened. And then when they brought it in force. And now you can guarantee this blasphemy law has nothing to do with blasphemy. Have a look at Father Ted or any of the other things that are around. Nobody's gone to jail for this. Why are they bringing it in? There's a reason they're bringing it in, and you guarantee it's something to do with free speech. They're backing it up with something else because they're bringing it in not for our safety. They only do things for the EU. There is no reason to bring in blasphemy law. Or to ban it. Nobody for 200 years have ever been charged. So why now? It's to do with our constitution. Watering down our constitution because we were very much to do with God. The constitution was written out in trust of God. So they want the power, not God, to be the power of Ireland. So that is where we are at. Anyway, thank you for listening on the Bon Ree Show and Irish News Radio. If you want to talk anything about, any questions if you have, or you want to have a discussion or a music of any kind, call in and keep in touch.
You are listening to Irish News Radio at irishnews.net. Email news@irishnews.net.
You're listening to the Bon Ree Show on Monday. It's 8 in the evening, So today, on Monday, we're talking about the financial mess, the EU, and the homeless crisis. Thank you for listening. Tune in every evening. Every evening there's a different topic that we will be discussing. So tune in and get informed. Find out what's happening and find out why it's happening. The blasphemy laws that we'll be looking at, it's not for our protection. It's to break down our constitution. Because if you look at Father Ted and many different programs that have come along, nobody has been charged for over 200 years. The government does not do anything for the people in mind. The government is complete EU puppets. It's to break down our constitution, to water it down even more, so that we will be under control, to take away our freedom of speech, to be able to speak out about the government. We're in a dangerous times unless you wake up and start fighting back. We need out of this government, first of all, before we can even get out of the EU. We need all of them gone. They're all traitors, they're all dangerous, they're all EU puppets. Thank you for listening on the Bon Reach.
You are listening to Irish News Radio and irishnews.net. Email news@irishnews.net.